so that it is easy for you to look what is being explained, what is being told. So you all can see, this is the first slide that I have explained yesterday. When we talk about communication, communication is a process. Whenever we are communicating with a person, say for example, if you are talking to yourself, even in such cases, there is a sender and there is a receiver. Sender is a person who is sharing the information, giving the instruction, giving the orders, or telling something to the other. The person who speaks, the person who talks, the person who conveys information is called as sender. The person who is receiving it, the person who is listening, the person who is understanding, the person who is accepting this particular instruction, order, or receives the information, we call them as receiver. Now, whenever there is a sender, he or she should be able to understand what to tell, what to communicate. Similarly, the receiver should be able to understand what is told, what was informed, what was instructed. So, in between the sender and receiver, there is a message. That message will travel from the sender to the receiver through different medium. Right now, I am conveying my information to you all, and this is online. And in order to have this particular interactive session, I need to have a laptop or a PC and then internet connection. Similarly, you are watching me either on your PC or laptop or on your mobile phone. Without that, without these mediums, it will be difficult for us to interconnect each other. Then we have discussed about the different forms of communication, wherein we talked about verbal and non-verbal. In the future classes, we are going to discuss once again about these. So please remember, for the time being, whenever we say communication, it is divided into two parts. The first is verbal communication and the second is non-verbal communication. When we say verbal, it is something which is either spoken or written. Verbal means either spoken or written. So whenever you say spoken, that means there is a person who is speaking, and of course there is a person who is listening to that speech. Similarly, whenever we talk about written, there is a person who is writing, and then after writing, there should be a person who is going to read it, right? So that is called as written. Under non-verbal, we talk about expressions, we talk about gesture. Gestures are those that are created, that are the shapes, that are the movement of your hands and fingers that you make while talking to others. You must have seen many a times when you're talking to your parents, when you're talking to your friends, your hands, they keep making different shapes, different movements would be there of your hand. Sometimes you open, sometimes you move your hand up and down, sometimes you wave it. So there are different gestures that are done, that are created, that are generated by our hand. Body language, it talks about how do you keep your body, how do you control your body, how do you sit, how do you stand, how do you walk, how do you carry your complete body. Proximity is about distances. Now, right now, during COVID, you all have come to know one common proximity, that is social distancing. Now, sometimes when our relationship is very close, when we are into intimate relationship, when we are closely connected with people, the distance between that person will be reduced. For example, if I talk about your relationship with your parents, you can touch them, you can have a word with them, you can embrace them. But if I'm having the same kind of talk with an unknown person, the distance goes on increasing. So proximity talks, remember this, proximity talks about space between people, distance between person to the person. All right, touch. Of course, many a times when we touch person, we try to communicate. By touching, we can make people understand what we are trying to communicate. So, for example, handshake. Why do we handshake? Because that is something which we are trying to communicate If you are shaking hand firmly, if you are lousily shaking, if you are giving the different shakes of your hand, it will have different understanding. So we are going to talk at length. We are going to discuss at length about proximity, about touch, about personal appearance in detail in our regular classes. But right now, keep this in your mind. Whenever we talk about nonverbal, it talks about proximity, it also includes touch, it talks about your personal appearance. How do you look? How do you carry yourself? What is your appearance and how does it look? Sometimes silence is also considered as a communication, as a form of communication. So when we talk about communication, please remember, broadly it is categorized into two, that is verbal and non-verbal. Verbal is again divided into two parts when we talk about an organization. If you're working in an organization, if you are associated with an organization, in such instances, it could be formal, it could be informal. Formal happens when you are having professional talk, when there is a professional talk between a person, could be an employee and employer, could be employee to employee, could be one employer to the other employer. We call it as formal. If it is unprofessional, if it is between colleagues, but it is not related to your work, not related to your job, not related to the kind of responsibility that you are in, it is called as informal. So please remember, when we say formal, formal can happen downward or upward. When I say downward, that is from top level management to bottom level management. Keep this in your mind. I request every time with every student of mine, whenever I'm explaining something, when I explain, you may sound it very easy and simple, but you should be able to recall it so that you can even write the same during your examination. So keep this approach in your life or develop this habit within you. Whatever is explained, whatever is shared, you should note it down. You should always sit for your classes along with a paper and pen. So note down, when we say verbal communication in a professional life, whenever I'm talking about you working in an organization, it would be verbal and non-verbal. When we say verbal, it is again divided into two parts, formal and informal. I'm talking about the communication that happens in the organization. When I'm talking about formal, it could be downward or upward. When I say downward, that means from top to bottom. That is super senior telling to senior and then senior telling to their juniors. For example, the hierarchy that you all know is of a school or of a college. The principal is the head of the institution. The principal will tell to the coordinator of the program or to the class teachers of that particular different classes. The class teacher will inform to the class representative or monitor. Monitor will inform the same to the class students. So this is called as downward. Upward goes quite opposite. That is from the bottom level management to the top level management. That means there is a worker, he is facing any problem. The problem that he is facing, he will report it to his supervisor. The supervisor will take this particular problem to the concerned department head. Department will tell to the managing director. Managing director will bring it to the notice of the employer. So there are two different forms, upward and downward. When we say informal, as I stated, informal are those which are unprofessional. Most of the time wherein you are communicating with your colleague, wherein you are communicating with your seniors or juniors, to have that small free flow of communication, like it could be lateral, wherein there is a person who is working in finance department, there is another person who is again working in finance department. When you are having words within your department, that is called as lateral. In the same department, in the same branch, in the same organization, when there is a communication having, or when the communication is flowing or the communication is going on between the same department people or between the same organization people, it will be considered as lateral. Diagonal is from one department to the other. For example, finance having words with HR, HR having words with marketing, marketing having words with IT. So this is diagonal. Grapevine is similar to gossip, where there is no clarity of what you are communicating. Please remember, whenever we don't give facts, whenever we are just sharing certain myth or just for the pass of time in your leisure, the talk that you are having with your friend, that is a reason why you have to just remember grapevine is informal, completely in a imbalanced way wherein you don't know whether the communication is correct or incorrect. You cannot judge it. So that is called as grapevine. Remember the structure of a grapevine. I don't know if you have seen the plant of a grape tree, but yes, it will be absolutely haphazard. It won't be straight. So if the communication is again here haphazard. All right. So this is the form of communication. Non-verbal is all kinetic. Kinetic means it's something wherein you can only see it, you can feel it, but you cannot have a record of it. For example, when I say formal, informal under the verbal communication, oral things you can record, written things you can still record. But when we talk about expressions, when we are talking about body language, when we are talking about touch, when we are talking about proximity, when we are talking about appearance, when we are talking about those gestures, too tough to record. So keep this in your mind that whenever you are asked to have a communication in an organization, of course you have to pay attention to non-verbal. Because of non-verbal, you will come to know about the behavior of your employee. But at the same time, you should equally focus on verbal, and many a times if you are communicating, make sure that you are communicating in recorded form. Say for example, if you have to inform someone that tomorrow is a holiday. If you give a phone call, the person may forget, and there is no record of that piece of information that there was a telephonic call wherein the person was informed that tomorrow is a holiday. But if you receive an email, it is an evidence, it is a proof that yes, there was a person with so and so email ID who has informed you that tomorrow is a holiday. So keep this in your mind that verbal maximum time written communication is considered as the best way of communication when you are working in an organization and when you want to have an evidence and proof of what you are trying to communicate. All right. So keep this record in your mind every time whenever you are communicating. This is the best way. This is the best practice. All right. Now moving ahead further when we are talking about the next slide, these are certain myths and realities of communication. Generally, in general, people believe whenever they are communicating consciously. In fact, many a times that we communicate, we are unconsciously communicating. What I'm trying to say is, whenever you are speaking, you don't plan, you don't prepare your speech, isn't it? Say, for example, if I ask you right now that Miss Simran have a word with Miss Silky. Now, Simran is not going to plan her communication, what she wants to talk to Miss Silky. Immediately, she will ask, what is your name? What did you study? Where is your residence? So that is unconscious. Many a times we believe that we are communicating with proper plan and preparation. In fact, we communicate many a times, or I should say most of our communication happens unconsciously. You have to remember this word. Most of the time our communication happens unconsciously, and that is the reason why we find it difficult to become great communicator, because there is lack of planning, there is lack of preparation, there is lack of practice, and there is lack of presentation. Similarly, when we talk about communication, we believe we are communicating only with the words that we use. You're wrong. If you believe whatever you are saying only that is important, again you are living in a myth. You communicate even with verbal as well as non-verbal communication. Say for example, you said you cooked something, you did not taste it, but you are asking your friend to taste it. As you have spent your complete 2 hours in cooking something, even though the taste was not that good, but still your friend will, in order to motivate you, in order to encourage you, she or he will definitely say, it's okay, right? But you can understand that what you have cooked is not that good. Why? through the non-verbal communication, you can catch the person was unhappy, the person was dejected, the person was not feeling that good, right? Or the excitement level was low. So you will come to know about your dish, your cook, your food that you have cooked. So through non-verbal communication. So keep this in mind whenever we talk about communication. It doesn't happen only through word. It also happens with words as well as this sign that is related to the non-verbal. Many times people believe whatever they are communicating, the other person will be able to understand and easily they can identify what they are saying. Right. Now let us have a small activity here. I want you all to please present yourself. Don't unmute yourself, but open your video. Open up your video and show up yourself on the video. Everybody, keep your video on. We are going to have this small activity just for a minute, all right? And then again, I'll ask you to lock yourself, lock your video, all right? Right now, I want you all to on your video. Don't unmute yourself, just on your video. Yes, Silky, you can on it, dear. On your video, please. Simran, request you to on your video. Fareed, request you to on your video. Similarly, Jyotsna, request you to on your video. All right. Now, this is a small activity and don't hesitate in participating. All right. Now, look at my words that I'm using. I want you to follow my instruction. I am going to give you some instruction. I want you to follow my instruction and then accordingly respond to it. You people are poor in obedience. You people are not at all obeying the things that I'm asking you to do. You should do it immediately. All right. It won't take more than 30 seconds. This is my promise to you all. But immediately you will come to know whether you could understand when I say whatever is said, can you really understand it or not? Put your right hand up, Simran. Put your right hand up. Put your left hand up. Left hand up. Left hand up. Similarly, now, Silky, my question, I am changing something. When I say right, you should raise your left hand. Jyotsna, when I say right, you should raise your left hand. When I say left, you should raise your right hand. Did I clear your this understanding? If I say right, raise your left hand. If I say left, you should raise your right hand. Are we ready? Quickly. Right. Jyotsna, I said, when I say right, you should raise your left hand. When I say left, you should raise your right hand. Right? Let us do it, everyone, all of you. Right. Right. Left. You can see. Thank you, Jyotsna. You are such a beautiful example for this. Now switch off your videos. Thank you very much for participating. God bless you all. Switch off, switch off. Turn off your video. Now, friends, you must have seen Simran, Silky, Fareed, when I said put your right hand up, but before saying that, I gave a small instruction. I said that when I say right, you should raise your left hand. When I say left, you should raise your right hand, isn't it? Now, Jyotsna, she was thinking, my right is this hand, my left is this hand. Madam has asked me to raise right, so she was raising her right hand. Similarly, when I asked left, she was raising her left hand. Why? Because she could not understand. I'm not saying understanding my instruction. There was a gap. There was a gap between understanding the instruction that was shared by the teacher, isn't it? And because of that, what has happened? Though she could understand the instruction, yet her performance was not exactly the way we wanted, isn't it? Now, quickly in the chat box, did you all understand that how these myths are really applicable in our day-to-day life? Did I clear your doubt? So if you are communicating, generally we believe I said this, my friend could understand. No. Many a times it happens, you are thinking that I explained it clearly. In fact, the other person could he or she understand exactly the same way that was communicated? We don't know. So keep this in your point, all right? So the first thing that we understood is communication happens unconsciously. Second thing, verbal and non-verbal, they both are very, very important. The third point that we have discussed is whenever we talk about words, using the words may have different perception. People may have different perception and they find it in their way. They understand it in their way. They try to understand and interpret information in different ways. The next point, communication is one-way process. No, communication is not a one-way process. It is a two-way process. Communication is always a two-way process. Whenever we say communication, it is from sender to receiver and from receiver to sender. Keep these two people in your mind here. Sender, receiver, receiver, sender. If your mother is asking you to have food, your mummy is a sender, you are receiving the information. But if you don't give any response, what is she going to do? She will repeat the statement, isn't it? She'll say that I have asked you to have your food. Did you finish eating or did you take your lunch or not? So please remember, communication is always a two-way process. Many a times the message that we are sending, all right, we believe that I am sharing the information, person is understanding exactly the same way. No, in transmission, whenever we are sharing the information, whenever it moves from sender to receiver, they may understand it in a different way. I have given you an example. Not only words, understanding. When we are understanding, our understanding may vary, our understanding may differ, and according to that difference, what will happen? You are going to see that there are different understanding. So with this, we are going to conclude chapter 1, part 1, wherein we have discussed about 2 to 3 different concepts. We have discussed about the process. We have discussed about the forms of communication. In organization, whenever we are working in an organization, what are the different forms that are applied, that are applicable in our day-to-day life? Then we discussed the common myth, the common things that are known to us, but we believe that this is right way. In fact, those are not the right ways. You have to really break those myths. Whenever we talk about communication, communication is something that could be practiced, that could be developed, that could be practiced, and then you can present it. Say, for example, today, if you believe I am not a good communicator, you can change your style of communication. This can be practiced. This can be modified. This can be rectified. Many of the students, they believe that I did not study in English, so I may be a poor communicator in English. Again, this is a myth. You have to break this myth. You have to overcome this particular wrong notion that is generated by your mind. How can you break this myth? By letting yourself knowing what I was thinking is wrong. If I practice, I can improve. If I don't practice, I cannot improve. So once when we are understanding these things, you will see you are going to become great communicator. And that communication is going to help you a lot. Because of that communication, you can see that you are doing fantastically good. So when we talk about communication skills, we have discussed about process. Whenever we talk about process, remember boys and girls, we are talking about two different entities. One is the sender, other one is the receiver. There is a message that is getting transferred from the sender to the receiver, and with some medium, it could be face to face, it could be telephonic, it could be video based, it could be in the form of letter or email, it could be in the form of SMS or chat, could be different modes used. All right. Then second thing that we have discussed is about the forms of communication, wherein we understood whenever we break the communication, they are categorized into two parts, verbal, non-verbal. When we say verbal, please remember, as a management student, you should always remember, if you really want to have an evidence, if you really want to have a great command over your communication skill, you should be good at oral and written. For you cannot have an option. You cannot say, ma'am, if I'm good at oral, but I'm weak or I'm poor at written. You have to improvise both oral communication and written communication. I'm not talking about language. I'm re-emphasizing over here. I'm not saying English. I'm talking about communication. If you are good at communication, that means whatever you are speaking in Hindi, whatever you are speaking in Bhojpuri, whatever you are speaking in your mother tongue, whatever you are speaking in any given language, the language that you use, the person whosoever is listening to you can exactly understand what you are trying to communicate. All right, this is called as oral. Similarly, whatever you write, when a person whosoever is reading, if he or she can understand what you have written, that is again part of your verbal communication. When we say non-verbal communication, it covers, as I stated, facial expression, it talks about gestures, it talks about posture, it talks about proximity, it talks about touch, it talks about appearance, it talks about silence. Many a times people, they don't want to communicate. So for example, if you're not listening to your parents, many a times you must have seen your father will not talk to you for a day or two. Your mother will not talk to you for a day or two. Why? Because of that particular gap, they will let you understand what they are feeling. They express their emotions, they express their communication with the help of their silence. So, silence is also part of communication. When we talk about flow of communication in an organization, it is formal and informal. When we talk about formal, we are talking about upward communication, downward communication. When we are working in an organization, many a times we talk to our colleagues, we talk to our peer group, we are talking to seniors, we are talking to juniors, or we are talking to the different department people. So when you are talking or having interaction within the department member, that is called as lateral. Lateral. Lateral communication is wherein you are having words or when you are communicating within the same organization, within the same department, within the same vertical where you are working. But once when you are crossing your vertical, crossing the boundaries, crossing your department, and when you are having interaction with the others, that is called as diagonal. Where there is a confusion, where the communication is not at all properly organized, if it is unstructured, if it is something where people are not having clarity related to what you are trying to communicate, then it is called as grapevine. Finally, we have discussed about the myth, the kind of wrong information that generally we all carry. We believe we are very good communicators. In fact, sometimes because of our understanding, because of our engagement of mind, because of many other activities, we may not be able to communicate exactly the way the sender or from the point of view of the receiver should behave, should react. So that's all in part 1 of chapter 1. In case if you have any doubts, I am giving you time to ask and clear your doubts. I'll share the video. I'm going to upload the video. I'll be sharing the link so that in case if you want to once again watch it, you can watch the video. You can go through it. If you have any kind of doubt, please raise. If the concept is clear, quickly in the chat box, no doubts. If you have understood the concept, do mention in the chat box, no doubt. See, you need to interact with me. Every student of mine, they interact with the help of chat box, and I'll come to know only with the help of your chat box that whether you all are listening to me or not. So please remember, always when you are attending my classes, you should be more active on your chat box. All right. I have received from 2 people. Simran, thank you very much for sharing that information, dear. Kumari Jyotsna, thank you very much, Peter, for sharing. I'm looking forward for the same response from Silky and Fareed, could you understand or you have any doubts, dear? If you have any doubts, don't hesitate in asking. In case if you have no doubts, do mention in the chat box, beta. Fareed, do you have any doubts related to whatever we have discussed today? Silky, similarly, dear, to you, could you understand? All right, thank you very much. Please remember, this is the way you're going to interact. Otherwise, what is going to happen? It will be one-way communication. And right now it's stated that it has to be two-way. How will I come to know on online classes whether my students are able to understand or not? You are going to interact with me and you're going to make this communication two-way communication. All right. If you're talking about other classes, Simran, I'm going to ask the concerned faculty coordinator to share the link with you all right? Give me 10 minutes time. After lunch, whosoever is going to take the class, I'm going to request the concerned faculty to share the link with you all. All right, beta? Is that okay with Simran? Thank you very much for attending today's class. We are going to have tomorrow at 10 o'clock this particular class. All right. So 10 o'clock, the first class will be English class. So do attend it, dear. We are going to talk about barriers of communication and we are going to talk about the principles of communication. In tomorrow's class, we are going to discuss about two different concepts. One is the barrier and the other one is principle. All right. Take care of yourself and have a great, fantastic day. Bye, everyone.